What is going on, garden fans? Welcome back to the Permaculture Homestead. I am at the home site today and wanted to give you the full walking tour of my home site food forest. It's looking really good right now. Most everything has put some green on. We're coming into June, July, August, which is the summer months for us here in South Carolina. Zone 8 generally ends up being the hottest time of year. We're more prone to drought, and I'm doing some things to help mitigate the drought. You can kind of see I've already got my drip line laid out here for my annual vegetable bed. I've been harvesting piles and piles of chamomile. And I love the flower heads for teas, and generally I kind of just pluck them off. I let them sit in a bowl and basically dry up. From there they get bottled in a glass bottle for later usage. But I love chamomile. I got chamomile growing this late into our season. It's actually pretty unheard of. I'm very slowly starting to pepper in the summer vegetables. So we've got things like squash and zucchini growing, and peppers. We've got peppers also coming in right now. And then more kale and collards are on the way. So this is my annual vegetable bed. It's right here on the back patio. Makes it easy to manage. The perennial side of things is a totally different story. It is looking thick and lush back here. The elderberry hedge I have is starting to flower. The elderberry puts on a big panhead of flowers. And this panhead is eventually going to turn into a pile of berries. You can kind of see how all the tops here are getting flowered up. I do love elderberry this hedge here. At this time of year, it's actually going to start providing some shade to the plants here on the west side of the house. So as this hedge continues to get taller, I'm getting some thermal protection on the back of my house, but also the plants growing in the shade, like the raspberries, are not hindered at all. They actually enjoy living in the shade. So raspberries in South Carolina are doable, provided they get a lot of shade. Now this raspberry patch doesn't only get but about 2 or 3 hours of direct sunlight every day. As the sun kind of peeks through the sky, let me show you here. Here's the kind of window of full sunlight that this plants get. And then they start to get dappled shade and even more shade as the sun works its way across the horizon here. So everything planted here has a purpose, it has a reason. Everything I'm planting is a food item. Of course, this is my food forest. Some of the things I do to help mitigate the drought is to plant very densely. So you can see I am planting very densely. I have 2 huge pawpaw patches here, not more than 6 feet apart. In between them, staggered, we have a peach tree. And then of course there's that elderberry hedge on the downhill side. Now, all the pawpaws have gone through a hand pollination process this year, and you can see we have got fruit on the pawpaws again. This is actually the first year that this plant has held its fruit. I pollinated it last year, but it did not hold any fruit. And the other patch of pawpaws is also putting on fruit. Just like last year, I hand pollinated and they're starting to set some fruit. So we're definitely going to have some pawpaw fruit set here throughout the food forest. The ground cover is mostly clover and lamb's quarters right now, although we have another traditional weed, quote unquote, coming up. A viney layer of passion fruit is coming up. Now I'm going to kind of step into the canopy here, garden fans. And I want to show you some of the things. It's really, really dense up here. And like I'm saying, I'm kind of underneath 2 peach trees. I have another fig tree not 6 feet away from one of these peaches. I like this fig right where it's at. During the winter, it gets a good protection from the trees around it. So figs are they're prone to freezing. They don't like the cold temperatures. So having this fig kind of sandwiched in between a mulberry tree on one side and then the peach tree on the other side, what happens is I'm getting a little bit of thermal protection for these figs that I have in the landscape. And this fig is huge right now. We're talking 15, 20 feet tall. This is a black mission fig. Hasn't put on any fruit yet though. Like I said, right next to it, we have a mulberry, a fruiting mulberry, female variety. I have 2 mulberries here on site. In between the mulberry and the fig tree, we've got some nitrogen fixation in the form of Elaeagnus, and I use Elaeagnus all over the place. It is my chop and drop plant. It is a sacrificial plant. This plant does put on berries and it will fruit for me. So it's one of those things that's it's absolutely necessary as far as I'm concerned. It's also doing a great job kind of keeping it dense. So once again, we're very droughty. The more shade I can provide my ground during the summer months is going to be better. The more water retention I'm going to get. And I water with swales. If you can see this trench here dug on contour, it's kind of a footpath that fills with water when I fill it up. Here's another one of those Elaeagnus. You can just see baby fruits coming on. So once again, this is a nitrogen fixing chop and drop tree that produces an edible yield. How can you go wrong with a plant like that? I have another fig tree here. Here's the other fig tree I have on site. I have 2 female fruiting mulberries on site here, and they are absolutely loaded with fruit. So we're getting fruit's coming on. We're getting blackberries, we're getting mulberries, we're getting the raspberries are coming on. And all the while I've got annual vegetables kind of waiting in the wings. So I got a whole bunch of potato pots out here waiting to, you know, be harvested. My muscadine grapes have been pollinated and slowly starting to put on fruit. And this is a nice little trellis here I've got kind of going down the fence line. The muscadine actually starts right over here, and it's kind of the vining layer for 2 plum trees in the back, and then a whole bunch of other shrubs right up here on this top Hugel Mound. I want to talk about this Hugel Mound because at one point in time this used to be 3 large garden beds. Basically, I had garden boxes here, and I've chopped down those boxes. I chop and dropped them. They were Hugel core, so they had wood core in them, and now it's basically the growing media for pomegranate, blackberry, and Elaeagnus. Here is the pomegranate tree, and it has gotten really large. It's flowering. It's gonna produce for me this year. Here's pomegranate flowering, and it's kind of pushed itself over on top of an Elaeagnus right here. So I have this nitrogen fixing shrub right next door to my pomegranate. It's not hurt at all. It's not, you know, this Elaeagnus is very hardy, and you can see fruiting as well, and then being a support species for the pomegranate. So just this idea of planting very densely is something that I've really taken to heart over the past couple years. I've really added a lot more nitrogen fixation in here. I'm stepping up the ground covers and the shrub layers. Here are some of the blackberries starting to fruit. And the reason this works is because blackberries don't mind getting a little shade. They don't mind being underneath a tree, especially in my zone, in my climate. It's super, super hot here come June, July, August. Let me get you a peek at the plums I have in the back. And they are very slowly starting to change color. If you can see, I'm going to step into the chicken pen where we got more plums, show you the plums. Before I do that, let me just take a pit stop here and show you a jujube. I have a Lee jujube here, over 20 feet tall now, really getting big. Jujube, look, you can see it's getting pollinated right now. It's pollinated by flies, believe it or not. These are very, very tiny flowers. And they flower later in the season, so they do kind of miss some of the pest cycles that we have here in South Carolina. And their fruit is very much like a crab apple. It kind of has got a crunch like a crab apple if you pick it early in the fall. If you leave it on the tree until later in the fall, the fruit kind of shrivels up and gets soft and sweet, kind of like a date. And that's where it gets its other name, Chinese date. And this Chinese date is the tree species. We have a whole bunch of companions around it. Once again, we have Elaeagnus around it. I also use a lot of winged sumac, which is a native shrub species here in South Carolina. And not too far from either of those is another pawpaw. You can see this pawpaw is living in the shade of these trees. That is not a bad thing for a young pawpaw early in its life. They don't mind the shade first few years as they're getting established. But eventually this pawpaw has some airspace to work with, and it'll be a little bit more dominant in the species. Once again, I'll continue to kind of cut down the peaches right here, peaches around the pawpaw, so that the pawpaws become the more dominant species as the things develop here. Just take a wide shot. It looks large. It's big, back garden fans. There's so much greenery, and I'm shaping trees around the food forest. I've got some wire here pulling this mulberry tree down and around, and I'm kind of using what Mother Nature has given me here to kind of create this living art installation, believe it or not. And that's how I look at this food forest at this point in the game. I have a brown turkey fig here in the chicken pen. It is not harmed at all by the chickens. These fruits are too tall. They're too high up for them to get at. They generally don't bug it anyway. I have never had a problem with this fig in here. It's got a cistern that I feed it with. So when it rains, if it ever rains again, the water stored ends up feeding right next to it, the fig right next to it. The plums, I was wanting to show you the plums, got sidetracked. Do have plum trees. I have a Methley and a Santa Rosa plum that are cross-pollinating each other, planted very close to each other, planted very densely, and the fruit is starting to change color. And what's going to happen is once they start to ripen is I'm going to get a slow harvest throughout June and July as we're slowly harvesting. And once again, I plant densely. So these two trees are in the chicken pen. They're not more than 5 feet apart. Let me give you one more wide shot at the food forest. Kind of step back a little bit. And at this time of year, you can't even see the back of my house. If you were here in the fall, you would have been able to see it very clearly. So as you can see, I'm really starting to develop a thick, dense canopy. This is really turning into a food jungle. I'm using all the space that I have. I'm growing and planting vertically, horizontally. I'm planting plants on top of each other, and the system works. It is very, very low maintenance. When I have a buildup of water, I release water into the system using swales to kind of buffer this system up and keep things moist. There is food on top of food, and speaking of water, I'm almost out of water, so I'm really looking for some rain here. I'm down to my last 200 gallons of water. Anyway, once again, let me give you a wide shot. It's one of my favorite shots to look at, kind of give you an idea of the density of the place. Really appreciate y'all watching this if you're still here. Please like, please share this video, please subscribe. That's what really helps us out. Get the word out. You can grow a lot of food in a very small space and be a lot more self-sufficient than what we are right now. We appreciate y'all watching. God bless.